liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
You're tapped in, so let's get to it. We see what's happening in the world. Every day there's something. And for those who call themselves our political leaders or our government, they seem to not be in touch with the effects of what's happening in the world upon the citizens of the world. There's a disconnect that is actually happening. And for this reason, citizens all over the world are suffering, but particularly so here in the United States. There's a lot going on here for a lot of reasons we don't understand, but in any respect, things are happening that are affecting each and every one of us, our bottom line, our livelihood, our way of life. All these things are starting to change, and not for the better. This piece, it is, titled Preparing for the Worst. And we'd like to ask or point out or, kind of advise everyone to get ready, prepare for the worst. And in that way, if something does occur that could be just devastating to, many, you'll find yourselves, some of us who are willing to take the advice of, you'll find yourselves in a better position. You're better prepared to deal with the hardships that may occur as a result of what we see happening in the world of politics, in the world in general, in the world of economics, education, employment, and in the world of, in society in general. Okay. That being said, before I get started, please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe. You are tapped in. This is the art of political discourse. Okay, so what's happening? All right, since February 2026, the U.S. and Israel have been in an active air war with Iran, and Iran has repeatedly attacked shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. This is also an issue. See, a lot of people don't understand how significant the Strait of Hormuz is. A lot of people think it's just oil that comes and goes, or, a liquid gas. It's more than that. It's fertilizer for the farms, for land, and without fertilizer, your crops can dry up. Your soil becomes, it doesn't have the nutrients it needs. It won't grow those things that we need to sustain ourselves. So, that is the importance of the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, but the passage is about a fifth of the world's oil and LNG moves through it. Okay, there was a ceasefire. MOU was also in place in June. Memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran. All right, but fighting resumed this week. All right, it continued, or it started again July the 11th or 2011th and the 13th. All right, now with the U.S. striking Iran again and Iran hitting tankers, including 2 UAE tankers just yesterday, this thing has the potential to spiral out of control in the worst way. All right. I mean, it's bad now, but it can be a lot worse. It can escalate to levels we haven't seen just yet. Now, effects so far, and this is concrete, you need to just think about this. Gas. In terms of gas, the nation average is around $4.87, or under $4. All right. A gallon. That's up 7 cents from a week earlier. Now, here in California, the gas has not went down. I think the average is over $5. All right. Now, after falling nearly 20%, let's say from a peak in late May. All right. It went down just a bit and slightly, and then it went right back up. All right. Prices topped at 5 gallons in California. In fact, it was more, going back to March. That's when, probably before that, we felt the effects of it, maybe a week or two right after this incident started. I think first week of March, actually. First week of March. All right. It toppled or it went above $5 a gallon, in that was in March for sure. Brent crude had jumped from 9.6% to $83, had jumped to 9.6, had jumped up 9.6%, excuse me, to 83.30, a barrel. That was Monday as fighting restarted. So I'm pretty sure today is probably higher, especially understanding that this thing has gotten worse in the last day or so, especially with the rhetoric coming out of the White House, but more precisely out of Donald Trump's mouth. Inflation, overall inflation actually cooled, they say, a bit to 3.5% in June from 4.2 in May, as gas prices had been easing. But that's now at risk of reversing. And again, some of these stats I don't think are realistic. We see food prices, fuel prices, prices in general just going up and not down. So I don't know where they're getting these stats. And it's understood here at TAP that to doctor stats is not a hard thing to do, to ease the mindset of the people who are suffering through, these economic, hardships. All right. That being said, the Fed economists estimate the war could add roughly 0.6 points to headline inflation and 0.2 points to core inflation in 2026 if the strait stays disputed for a quarter. Longer disruptions mean bigger effects. And again, we're seeing those effects, and they don't seem to be going down at all. The effects of this situation in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz especially, have reached many households in these United States, I'm pretty sure. Now, as far as jobs and growth, Goldman Sachs has put a 12-minute recession risk at 30% and expects unemployment to reach 4.6% by year end, largely because of oil shock. Now, what does that mean demographically? All right. And I think that's where it matters most, so Black Americans are, fundamental Black Americans, African Americans are going to be faced with a greater shock in terms of unemployment than what is put out there by the Labor Department. All right. Rent and housing costs aren't directly tied to oil, but a weaker job market and higher overall inflation put pressure on affordability broadly. And that brings into mind a lot of what we see in terms of rent and mortgages going up. People are having a hard time just paying rent as it is. Now, the understanding is that will more than likely go up as well. There are going to be added charges, it's going to cost more to rent. It's going to cost more on the mortgage, things of that nature. Most families are living paycheck to paycheck, and some are just one paycheck away from being homeless here in this country. That's something else that needs to be discussed or is not being addressed as it should by this government. As we see this homeless situation playing out in the United States, we're coming to understand that because it is so dire that the government is proposing to criminalize homelessness. Okay. I just did some content on that yesterday. Go check out the Art of Political Discourse, and you'll see that piece in there. And it speaks directly to what the government is proposing, especially Utah, West Virginia, Louisiana, and Texas, in terms of homelessness. All right. That is a problem that they think they found a fix for. And that fix would be to involuntarily commit people to these homeless camps, or what they call involuntary civic commitment facilities. All right. There's a lot behind this stuff. But that's the thing that we see taking effect. And it probably started before this war started. I'm pretty sure it did. But this war doesn't make it better. It doesn't make the situation any easier to deal with. Now, should people prepare? Absolutely. Absolutely. And this isn't an apocalyptic scenario, This isn't like in that territory of apocalyptic territory. You know, it's just a real but bounded economic shock taking place. And we tend to think that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Now, while the people suffer, the government continues to enrich itself. They have no worries. They are so far removed from what we have to live through day by day that it's shameful. It's shameful. All right. So similar in shape to past oil prices. Let's look at it like this: the 1970s, 1990, 91, 2022 wasn't a collapse, you know, but there was an issue. You know, people went through stuff, you know, had to spend more money, you know, savings had dwindled, things of that nature, you know. So, but anyway, sensible non-alarmist steps should be this: build and maintain an emergency fund, all right? 3 to 6 months of expenses put away, socked away, a nest egg somewhere, all right? If you can, all right? This matters more than any specific commodity, all right? The second thing, budget for gas price vulnerability, excuse me, validity, all right? Volatility, excuse me, rather than assuming today's price holds. If you drive a lot, this is where you'll feel it first and most directly. Volatility. I don't know what was wrong with me. Excuse me. Anyway, also expect grocery and shipping dependent goods to drift up gradually. And well, we know for a fact in our household, it's not gradual. That thing is moving up expeditiously. The prices are just outrageous. All right. For the groceries that, you know, we go to buy, most of which are GMO, things of that nature. All right. Groceries, those groceries that tend to be more organic and actually real, you know, fruits and vegetables, meats, things like that actually cost more. All right. So keep that in mind. Expect grocery and shipping dependent goods to drift up gradually and not spike overnight. No need to stockpile. We tend to disagree. All right. Stockpile. All right. Also, if you have debt or big purchases planned, keep an eye out on the Fed. A Fed governor already floated the idea of holding or raising rates if inflation reaccelerates, which affects mortgage and credit costs. So they're telling you, or it's, you know, come on, use some common sense. That's going to happen. That's going to happen. All right. For those of you who have mortgages, those of you who have plans, you know, to do things with your family or make improvements on your home, whatever, know that this is going to cost more. It's going to cost more as a result of what's taking place. And again, we don't blame this solely or just, you know, just totally on what's happening in the Middle East with Iran. We've seen this thing taking effect before all this started. Most of you should be aware of that. All right. Also, diversify where reasonable rather than betting on any single prediction. Oil futures markets themselves are split on whether it's cooled down or drags on. All right. But anyway, the honest answer is nobody knows how long this thing will last. All right. That's a fact. It depends on whether the ceasefire framework holds or the current flare up escalates further. But good economical hygiene or good financial hygiene, savings buffers, avoiding new high interest debt, budgeting for costs to go up, you know what I mean? That sort of thing is the right response, not crisis mode prepping. Now, let me add to that. Listen, it's not the war that's doing this. That's just the distraction. That's the excuse. And again, we see those in power, you know, government officials, the president, family members, allies, and friends to oligarchs, corporations, CEOs, things of the nature. They are getting richer while the people continue to suffer. So that is something we want you guys to keep in mind of. Keep that at the forefront of your brains. Do not wait till it's too late to be prepared for the worst, you know? So prepare. You should prepare. Now, to give us a little more context, I have a couple of clips I want to run with you guys. And again, this is TAP, the Art of Political Discourse. We appreciate your viewership and participation. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, let's get to these clips because, again, this is some serious stuff happening. You know, and for whatever reason, the government tends to always keep the American people, the American government tends to keep the American people distracted with a lot of foolery and frivol, things that don't really matter. You know, the things that matter, you know, most of us are not focused on, you know, and if we tend to focus on those things that truly matter, then we'll find that we are preparing, or we can prepare ourselves before the worst happens, if the worst should occur. All right. Now let's get to this. All right. This is courtesy of Life Worth Living. All right. So let's go on and get in here.
For the longest time, the GCC was the main driver of the global economy. It basically sold oil really cheaply for US dollars and recycled it back into the US economy. So if the GCC were to be removed from the global economy, this would have tremendous consequences for everyone. So they say that in a month or two, the world will run out of strategic fuel reserves. And this is going to ground a lot of airplanes. The bigger issue is that
now, right quick, as I know it, because my feed it informed me, it notified me that right now in Europe, they're having jet fuel shortages. All right. Now that's an indicator right there. That is enough. That should be enough to alarm anyone, whether you're flying or not. You know, we tend to want to associate, you know, how our money is spent and, you know, what it goes to, as opposed to what it doesn't go to, you know, being the reason, you know, or being why we spend our money. You know, we think that, okay, if I don't spend my money over here in this sector, I'm okay over here. And it doesn't work like that. In a lot of respects, all things are connected. All right. And so even if you don't take a plane flight anywhere in this country or throughout the world, the fact that there is a jet fuel shortage will still affect you in some form of fashion.
Strait of Hormuz provides the world with 1/3 of its fertilizer. And right now it's growing season around the world. So
that part. So if the strait is closed, growing season is about to start, and there's no fertilizer to get to these farms all over the world, that's going to present a problem, especially in food costs. That means then you're going to have to shell out more money. It's going to be more expensive because there may very well be a shortage.
It's very possible that in 5 months, 6 months' time, we see widespread famine all around the world, especially in Africa. So the geopolitical consequences of what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, it cannot be overstated. And unfortunately, the world is not at all prepared for the radical economic and geopolitical consequences of what's happening.
Okay, so in that respect, he said Africa will be hit the hardest, and there may be some truth to that. However, I want to throw in here what I've learned that is taking place in Africa, especially in the Sahel states, the AES, that would be Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. They are in the process of producing, manufacturing, processing their own fertilizer. All right. That is going to be, I'm sure, in a lot of respects, lifesavers for neighboring countries who will need fertilizer that very well may import fertilizer from or through the Strait of Hormuz. So kudos to the AES of the Sahel states who are looking ahead, who are preparing. And again, this is what this piece is about. It's about people preparing, prepare.
Happening right now. So right now, Iran has exerted control and sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. It's collecting tolls de facto, and no matter what, they won't give it up because they can use the Strait of Hormuz to reconstruct their economy, to industrialize it, and to build stronger trade relations with China and Russia. So if status quo stands, then Iran has a lot to benefit. The United States has imposed naval blockade, basically trying to embargo Iranian ships, trying to export oil to China. From what we've seen, it's actually very hard to enforce this blockade because the Indian Ocean is so vast. And right now, the American Navy doesn't have the resources to enforce a full blockade. Right now, it's the UAE that is most desperate for war because they've lost control
of the UAE, and I also think Israel would be the UAE, maybe even Bahrain. But yeah, the UAE and Israel, if anyone, who is most desperate for this war to happen.
over trade. Dubai is a very important hub for trade and for finance in the Middle East, and its reputation has been shattered. And the only way for the UAE to regain its reputation as a safe harbor for transnational capital and for trade is by extinguishing the Iranian threat once and for all. Saudi Arabia is in a very precarious position because the Iranians control the Strait of Hormuz, but they also, through the proxies, control the Red Sea. And then Israel wants to see this war continue because Israel has the ambition for Greater Israel. So Israel has already discussed or warned that they will attack Turkey and Egypt next. And this is all part of the Greater Israel project.
Okay, so when we hear the discussion from, or the statements, propaganda even, from the United States and Israel about Iran and the nuclear weapon, most of us need to know, or you should know, that that's all propaganda. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, was not even in the process of trying to assemble a nuclear weapon. True, they have 441 kilograms of uranium that has been refined, that, you know, that could be used for such a thing, but that's not their intent. That's not something they've been working on. Now, why then did this war happen? This war happened because Israel needed this war to happen so that it could execute its Greater Israel plan, or Greater Plan Israel, right? And that would mean, or what that entails, is the takeover, basically, of the greater part of the Middle East. All right, Iran has to be out of the way. Turkey, Egypt, you know, they want to come. Saudi Arabia is our Israel's, the Zionist regime of Israel wants hegemony over the area. It has nothing to do with nuclear weapons, nothing at all. It has more to do with land grab, occupation, resource theft, things of that nature. That's really what this thing is about.
So I think that the situation in the Middle East is a powder keg. And it's very, very hard for the status quo to maintain itself. And eventually we will see a breakout of regional hostilities again, possibly with American airstrikes against Tehran, possibly with the Israelis creating a false flag incident in Strait of Hormuz, very much like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which is what accelerated the Vietnam War. And so I don't really see things as staying as they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if the status quo were to maintain itself for the next 3 to 5 months. The reason why is that Trump does not want to be seen as a loser. He needs something to distract people's attention, and it's very possible that they come to a tentative agreement that is not at all sustainable. And then Trump switches his attention to Cuba. Right now, the Americans have imposed an embargo on Cuba. The Cubans going to access fuel and food and water. And the Americans have also indicted Raul Castro. And this could be a replay of Maduro, where they indicted Maduro for weapons trafficking, and then they sent in special forces to kidnap him, basically.
Navan, the #1 rated business travel platform, lets your team book work travel in one place: flights, hotels.
So it's very possible that we will see Cuba as the next global flashpoint. And
now, in regards to that, what the United States did to Venezuela, Maduro, is what we see actually attempting to take place with Iran. The United States went in, created these false charges, made themselves judge and jury of a sovereign nation, kidnapped the leader of this nation, brought that individual to the United States, turned around, and then laid claim to its resources. Lay claim to its resources. So what we see occurring in Iran is similar, almost the same thing. It's the point that Israel is attempting to dismantle, not just dismantle, but to do away with, eliminate the IRGC, as well as the religious government that is in power there. And their reason for doing that, needing to do that, is because of the resources there and the land. You know, they would take it and probably chop it up, you know, divide it, you know, make new countries, whatever. But the point is, almost the act The endeavor is almost the same as what we've seen took place in Venezuela with the United States. The United States did exactly what Israel wants to do with Iran, steal its resources and its land, lay claim to the area.
As you know, Russia is heavily invested in Cuba. Both the Chinese and the Russians are trying to support Cuba in this very difficult circumstance. But it's entirely possible that North Korea, South Korea could also become another flashpoint. This war in Europe is only going to escalate. As you know, there was an attack on a student dormitory in Luhansk, Russia. Putin was very upset and he promised swift and decisive retaliation. So it seems like all gloves are off. But if Putin declares war, then Russia would switch to total war. So I see this conflict in the Middle East basically dragging the entire world into World War III. And right now, we're just waiting for the storm to break. America is running against the clock. America has a bomb on its hands. It's called the national debt. Right now, America has $39 trillion in debt. And so America spends about $2 trillion annually on interest payments alone. And so the only way to sustain its debt is for America to force people to continue to buy US Treasuries. And right now, what we're seeing is a sharp increase in US Treasury yields. And so America can't afford to wait, because if you just wait, everyone's going to dump their US Treasuries. Right now, Japan and China are dumping their US Treasuries. The GCs are also dumping their US Treasuries in order to buy gold, in order to finance their economies now that they can't sell oil. So America has a very short time frame to conclude this war in the Middle East. It cannot afford to wait, because if it waits too long, then its entire economy could collapse. We don't know the specifics, but we do know that it's a ticking time bomb. So it's impossible for America to retreat from this war. And the reason why is the national debt, $39 trillion. And if America were to retreat from Iran, it would signal to the world that America is a paper tiger. It can no longer enforce dollar as a global reserve currency, and they'll be forced to dump US Treasuries in order to finance their economies, especially the GCC. So retreat is just not an option. It's also not an option to continue the war as it is, where America bombards Iran continuously. And the reason why is that over those 6 weeks, when America was bombarding Iran continuously, they spent about 4 years of munitions. So their stockpile is depleted, right? So they cannot continue this air war. It doesn't get you anywhere. And so the only option that they have is to eventually insert ground troops, to use a ground invasion. But for that to happen, you would need a national draft. You would call up, about, I would say, at least 500,000 soldiers and send them off to Iran. And in that instance, you might have a possibility of winning. And in order for America to justify a national draft, you need a series of events to happen. Okay, you need a false flag incident. You need a justification to rally the American people. But you also need to create enough economic chaos within America and outside the world so that people will accept a ground invasion of Iran. So I think what's happening is that the Trump administration, they are intent on continuing this war, but they're just waiting for the economic pain to spread across the world so that the entire world begs America to end the Iran issue once and for all. And the world knows that there's no way that America surrenders. So the only option is to support America in its invasion. And already we're seeing NATO considering sending forces to the Strait of Hormuz. So there's a larger American grand strategy behind all this. So for the longest time in a unipolar world, America guaranteed peace and safety for everyone. And that's what allowed for global trade, and that's what allowed for a period of tremendous peace and prosperity. And now that America has $39 trillion in debt, and now that the American economy has basically been hollowed out because they've, financialized their economy and they shifted their manufacturing to China, now America cannot afford to guarantee peace and safety for the world. And so what America wants to do is shift the world into one of continuous conflict. So the grand vision is that America retreats back into the Western Hemisphere. It's something called the Don Road Doctrine, where it's complete control over all the nations of the Western Hemisphere, including Venezuela, Cuba. But after Cuba, we can imagine the Americans will target Canada, Greenland, Mexico, Colombia. So you create a fortress, North America, and then you plunge the world into war by causing conflicts throughout the world. So in Europe, there'll be a war between the Russians versus the Ukrainians, backed by the Germans, the French, and the British. And while this war is raging, America will provide financing, armaments, and resources to Europeans to ensure that they will fight this war to the last European. And by doing this, the Americans can sustain their national debt and grow their economy. In Asia Pacific, we're seeing the same thing played out, where the Shangri-La Forum just concluded in Singapore, and China did send a representative, but China was not there. Peter Hegseth was there, the Japanese were there, the Filipinos were there, there. I think what's going to happen is that the Americans retreat from the Asia Pacific and let Japan and South Korea do more of heavy lifting. And they'll be backed up by American allies in the first island chain, specifically the Philippines. And the goal is to force these nations to come in conflict with each other so that they're now, again, forced to buy American armaments and resources. And
okay, so right quick, I don't know if a lot of you know, but America, one of its, what it sells most, more than anything, are weapons. Fighter jets, tanks, you name it. United States, through its through the corporations here, you know, the military industrial complex, the United States sells weapons like nobody's business, like no one else in the world. It is one of their sources of income. This is how they make their money. The other is, it's been alleged, is drugs. United States sells more drugs. In fact, they are the kingpin of, allegedly, of drug sales throughout the world. All right. It's been alleged that the cartel actually works for the U.S. government, CIA, things of that nature. So the United States has always had its hand in those things that are devastating to people all over the world, not just here in the United States, where blacks have experienced that firsthand, where the United States government fed drugs into black communities. And not only that, but guns, an influx of guns, military style weapons are also in these communities in the United States. So just so you know, the United States have ways of making money or continuing to make money. Weapons of war is one, and pharmaceuticals, we'll call them pharmaceuticals, as another. So, and they provide all over the world, all over the world.
so that's the world that America wants to create, a war of continuous conflict, which is very similar to World War II. You know, Trump talks about how to make America great again. Well, World War II is what made America great because the Europeans exhausted themselves on a battlefield, and then the Japanese exhausted themselves on a battlefield in China. And then towards the end, the Americans came up and cleaned house and conquered the world and established Pax Americana. So I will not be surprised if American strategists were not planning the same thing, where they want to plunge the world back into World War III, and then America will be left alone, and America can rebuild its manufacturing base. And eventually, when the time is right, America will then conquer the world again and establish Pax Americana again. That, I think, is the larger grand strategy here. What America is most interested in is access to the Chinese financial market. And the reason why is that Chinese save 40% of their income. So China has the highest savings rate in the world. And what American companies like Visa, BlackRock, Blackstone, what they want to do is financialize these household savings, basically force Chinese into American debt in order to sustain the American Ponzi scheme. And this was actually a precondition for China's WTO entry 25 years ago. So I think the Chinese will agree eventually to open up its financial market, but not liberalize its currency, maybe allow Chinese to buy stable coins, which is basically a backdoor into US treasuries. In return, what I think the United States will do is declare that they oppose Taiwan independence. This is something that the Chinese have been asking for politically for the longest time. So Trump, after the visit, said that, you know, Taiwan is not really a big deal. He doesn't really care. He's also paused a $14 billion weapons shipment to Taiwan, which is a very big deal. There's talk of Trump wanting the Taiwanese to onshore its semiconductor industry to America. So TSMC, the largest Taiwanese semiconductor company, they've opened a factory in Arizona. So America is perfectly willing to sacrifice Taiwan, but it means that it's able to access China's financial market. So President Xi has said that he will visit America in September. And there are rumors that at that time, China will announce a $1 trillion investment in American manufacturing, meaning some of China's leading EV manufacturers will move to America and open factories. So I think a grand bargain is afoot. And I think a condition of this grand bargain is to settle the Taiwan issue. So I think that both the United States and China would want a peaceful resolution to this Taiwan issue. But there's a problem. The problem is Japan. Because if Taiwan were to reunify with China, China would now have access to the Pacific Ocean. The first island chain will be destroyed, and China now can have a blue water navy. This is a direct threat to Japan's interest because Japan is primarily a naval power. It is primarily dependent on the outside world for imports and resources. And if China were to establish a very strong blue water navy, it could blockade Japan. So there's absolutely no way that Japan would countenance a reunified Taiwan, China. And so the possibility of this happening is almost zero. So by opposing independence, what Trump is really doing is basically transferring the Taiwan issue from America to Japan. And I think from American perspective, that's a very good and a very strategic thing to do. So I think Taiwan, it's not a flashpoint. I think the real flashpoint is North Korea. So given the current geopolitical chaos, what North Korea could easily do is threaten Japan and South Korea. Most people don't know this, but Seoul is within the range of North Korean artillery. So,
okay. And so this is just, well, that was just a glimpse into what could very well be coming down the pipes. I think it has, his statement at least has some credibility. We see these things occurring. We see how the United States is playing its hand. 1 minute it can care less about this country, that country, the Strait of Hormuz or whatever, and then the next it's all in and it's theirs. They want it, you know, things of that nature. Statements like that. There's something greater going on, and we tend to think that it is or it has to do with a war, a world war. Because for the United States, that would be very lucrative. They would clean up. They would make a lot of money just on weapons alone. You know, you imagine that taking place, then you imagine the pharmaceutical companies getting into that. They get out the world war. You're going to need medicines and you're going to need all kinds of things. And, you know, pharmaceuticals that are based here in the United States, they are, you know, giants in and of themselves. You know, the pharmaceutical industry is a very, very large industry, very lucrative at that. So, yeah, that is part of what needs to be done. Well, you need to take it to consideration so that you know how to go about preparing yourself for the worst. The economy is going to get worse. Gas prices will go up. Rent and mortgages will go up. Groceries will go up. Insurance. All these things will be affected based upon what's taking place in the world today. All right. And we think again that, you know, the war in and of itself is actually a distraction. There's again, in the sense that Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapon. That's just the propaganda we've been fed. The fact of the matter is there are resources that are needed by certain countries. Not only that, but some countries are going bankrupt or, you know, have national debt, things of that nature that they have to find a way out of. All right. War is the way for them to dig themselves out of this hole. So this, in that respect, this is why we say, prepare yourselves, people, because the worst is yet to come. All right, that's that clip. I have another I want to share with you guys. Well, let's see. Yeah. And what's coming is worse than any recession. Okay, let's drop that in there right quick. Get a few minutes of this. Okay.
Whatever part of freedom you're fighting for, that's what we want. We want freedom. And ultimately, it's one thing, because we have a secret governance system that's trying to assert more and more central control. And we all feel it, even though we're pushing back. So what is happening is a process began in the 90s where the central bankers said, you know, currently the central bankers run monetary policy, the money supply, the currency. But the people's representatives, whether it's the legislature or the executive branch, run fiscal policy. So that's, setting the taxes, collecting the taxes, spending the tax money. And the bankers said, let's have a financial coup and use digital technology and take over fiscal policy as well. So we, the bankers, can run monetary and fiscal policy. And the way they're doing this is by moving to an all digital financial system where you can use what's called programmable money. Some people have heard of central bank digital currency. That's a kind of programmable money. But let's talk about our current system. In our current system, we have what I call two-lock money. So you're a buyer, I'm a seller, we transact, and you have a lock and I have a lock. If you say no, transaction doesn't happen. If I say no, transaction doesn't happen. Now, financial institutions can intercede with money laundering regulations or know your customer or other sort of rules, but basically the transaction is going quickly and we're the only people who can stop it, okay? They want to move to a system called three-lock money. That's programmable money. There's you and there's me, and then there's Mr. Global's complex algorithm backed up by all those wonderful data centers, right? And Mr. Global gets a say on every transaction. So if Mr. Global says you can't leave your 15-minute city, your money won't transact outside of your 15-minute city. So it's got spatial control, it's got all sorts of medical and food control. So if I'm interested in medical freedom, why do I care?
Are people hearing this? This is what's happening in the world, and this is why we're suggesting here at TAP that you prepare yourselves for what's coming down the pipes. Now, this is another aspect of what will hit a lot of families, not just here in the United States, but around the world. What you call or think is your money then becomes something that the bank controls at their discretion. If they say, hey, well, you just spent $150 Monday, it's Friday, so no, we're not going to allow you to have access to your $150 until 2 days later, next Monday. This is what is occurring. This is what's taking place. So the digital banking system is actually up and running. Only thing left to complete this transition is the removal of paper money from the system. And that is also taking place, believe it or not, but once that occurs, the banks will control your purse strings, your wallet, your accounts. How do you prepare for this? I think that's the overriding question.
And that's because we can pass all the federal, state, and local laws we want saying we're free to do whatever we want. We're free to say no to a health mandate. And that may be, our state may protect our religious exemption or our ability to not comply with a mandate. But literally, if the banks turn off your money and say, okay, well, if you don't comply, we're going to turn off your money.
Hey, listen, if you own a business that makes over $200,000 per year in gross revenue, what if I told you there's a group of lenders literally fighting to fund your growth, and you could get up to $3 million?
The state won't force you to do it, but you won't be able to transact in the general financial system. Now, this includes your financial assets because they're now saying they want to issue digital tokens on your financial assets in a way that they're on a distributed ledger and they can make them programmable. So last year we passed the Genius Act, which is an act describing the regulatory framework for stablecoins, which to be used as a currency. Right now, we have Congress negotiating the Clarity Act. And the Clarity Act describes digital tokens. And what we know is that Wall Street and the banking system want to use digital tokens to trade all the other assets, both real assets like your house or your stocks and bonds. And what they've said is they want to move all the stocks and bonds in the world onto a distributive ledger, which gives them then the ability to make it programmable. And the Bank of International Settlements, which has been running the process on central bank digital currency, has announced it's making an inventory of all the assets in the world. And they want to be able to trade all assets with a digital token. One of the creepiest things I've ever heard was a software developer bragging about how cool this was, because you could go to the grocery store and pay for your groceries with 0.01% of your house equity. So here's what's very confusing. If you look at the debate about the Clarity Act, it's still not clear to me exactly how they're proposing the system is going to work. And if you read all the different sort of things that can be found on what they're proposing, I think it's still very fluid. So you just need to remember now, DTC is basically the archive of who owns what stock and bonds, and it runs that process for $114 trillion of stocks and bonds. DTC has just announced, even though the Clarity Act hasn't finalized yet, that they're launching their distributed ledger system to trade everything with tokens, along with 50 major financial institutions. So this is moving very, very quickly. And Washington right now is in deep debate about the details of how this is going to work. But what is important for people listening to know is financial system, which is no longer going to be financial system as we know it. It's a control system. And what you do is you do everything to slow them down or stop them. Because this is a vision that if the bankers control fiscal policy, that is the end of taxation with representation. That is the end of the Constitution. So the other thing we need to do is make sure the system never goes all digital. So we've been working for years to promote cash and to help people understand, start today, use as much cash as you can. And cash is becoming in many places more popular. One, we're dealing with inflation, which is likely to get worse. And cash is a way to protect yourself because the fees are really draining a big portion of the GDP in a place. But the other thing is there have been so many natural disasters where if people didn't have cash, they were in real trouble. The leaders of ending cash have been the Scandinavian central banks. And after several disasters, including the floods in eastern Tennessee and North Carolina, the Scandinavian central banks came out and said, it was a mistake to roll back cash. We can't trust that electricity is always going to work. We need cash. And I think there's a lot of young people who've had it with the encroachment of the surveillance and the digital control. And the programmable money in the digital control grid depend on 3 pillars to execute. One is the programmable money, and that's why you see the Clarity Act and this other legislation happening. The second is the digital ID, which they tried to use the vaccine to implement. But the third thing is you need all the local surveillance and hardware. And as the flock cameras and the state, the override of local controls on the telecommunication and the data centers are going, and people are going like, what is this? Right.
So we just did some content today on the flock camera issues and how she's correct. The youth in the country and others actually are against flock cameras and mics in such a way or to such a degree where they're starting to tear them down, deface them, disconnect them, things of that nature. They're coming up missing. One state actually killed a contract with flock while another state, began a new contract worth about 31 million to have flock put up around, the state. This is becoming an issue. So when we start putting out content and we're saying to you guys here at TAP, we're saying to you guys, get ready. We're saying that for a reason. Things are happening at breakneck speed that a lot of us can't keep up with. And by the time we gain a little momentum and we pick up our pace trying to understand what the system is offering or has taken from us, it's too late. It's too late for a lot of us to overcome what has already occurred. And so this is why we say, hey, know what's coming, all right? Know what's headed in your direction, what's coming down the pipes at us. Know enough in order for you to prepare for the worst. The worst is actually here. It's happening now. We see all these things occurring. And for a lot of reasons, a lot of us are so distracted in these minuscule, these issues that really have no substance, carry no weight. We're focused on that rather than those issues, those everyday issues that actually matter in our lives. We lost focus of that. And as a result, we are left behind in terms of what's really taking place and what's really being set out in front of us. The more they set it out, the further back we are from it. Then there are more hurdles for us to jump and hop over, go through, go around, go under, over. So this is why we do what we do here at TAP. We want you guys, we would like for you guys to be informed. So we're saying to you guys, prepare for the worst. All right. I'm going to end it here. And also for those of you who, whether you have a backyard or not, one of the things also that the family should do, you don't have to have a family, you can be a single person. is grow your own vegetables. Start the process of growing your own food. All right. Start the process of understanding how electricity works, how magnets and batteries can provide electricity without solar power, or electrical wires and things of that nature. Learn how or prepare yourselves for collecting your own water, which is also something that is at risk because of data centers and AI corporations who are buying water rights all over this country and the world. So yeah, again, when we are saying to, you, our viewers, hey, it's time to prepare for the worst, trust us, start to prepare for the worst because we're already in the beginning stages of it. All right. And again, we'll leave it there. More content will be coming at you guys shortly. Until next time. Well, if you have any thoughts on this, any thoughts whatsoever in terms of what we just shared in this content, please put it in the comments. Whether you agree or disagree, put your opinions in the comments and we will answer each and every one of them. All right. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.